Hey guys, I made a big decision. I decided to compete in a bodybuilding show in November. I was thinking about competing in bodybuilding again for a while, and then last week suddenly I just felt like I have to do it now. I have to start prepping now. It was a really spontaneous idea, but usually when I get these spontaneous ideas, it's kind of a sign that I'm really ready to do something and that I really want to do it. It was the same when I decided to move away from England and just travel around the world. A few days ago, I posted on social media that I'm going to start prepping for a bodybuilding show. And then I was asked a few questions about my prep, especially what my macros are. That's why I decided to make a YouTube series out of it, just by telling you how my show prep goes, what I do, why, what is the scientific rationale behind the things I do. And today is the first video of the series, and I will speak about my macros. I was asked what are my current cutting macros at the beginning and how am I going to drop them over time. To be honest, the strategy I am going to try is completely different to most strategies that are applied for bodybuilding show preps. Usually people start with pretty high calories. They try to diet on as many calories as possible to make it less painful, and then they drop it over time. I want to do, or actually I started doing, exactly the opposite. I dropped my calories at the beginning as much as possible, as much as I could tolerate without being hungry, without having my gym performance to suffer, without feeling deprived, and then I'm going to increase my calories over time. This strategy makes actually the most sense for me, because when I have more body fat to lose, I can tolerate a higher energy deficit without losing so much muscle mass. I'm sure you wonder, how did I get this idea? Well, last year, the paper on metabolic damage was published by the Bayesian research team I'm a part of. And for this study, I analyzed the data from the Minnesota starvation experiment. The Minnesota starvation experiment was an experiment at the end of the Second World War, where 32 men were kind of semi-starved for half a year, and all their data was recorded. Their goal was to lose 1 kilogram per week for 24 weeks. This is a lot. They ended up at 5% body fat, like most of the bodybuilders on stage. The problem was just they didn't have so much muscle mass, so they were really miserable. So when I looked at this data, then I actually saw that the people who started at a higher body fat percentage lost relatively less muscle. Here on the y-axis is the energy that the participant lost as muscle mass or as protein. Imagine if a person lost so much weight that corresponds to 10,000 calorie deficit. If the person had, for example, around 20% body fat when he started, then only 20% of this energy this person burned, this person lost, came from protein. However, if the person was at 10% body fat when he started, then about 40% of the energy the person burned came from muscle. For this reason, it makes totally sense for me to start at a higher calorie deficit as long as I have more fat to lose, and then when I will drop my body fat percentage, actually to be more careful. If I will be happy with my progress, I will probably increase my energy intake and my protein intake. Because one thing we should never forget is that there is a constant protein balance and protein adjustments in the body. After you've eaten, you start building protein, especially if you have exercised before. When you fast during the night, then more protein is degraded. And if this protein balance is positive, if you build more protein, muscle protein over time than you degrade, then you gain muscle. If you degrade more protein than you build over time, then you're in a negative protein balance. This means you lose more muscle. When I lose more and more body fat, and the probability is higher that I'm going to start losing more muscle mass, just because I have lots of body fat loss, there's not so much to lose, so my body will start metabolizing muscle. Then I just want to add additional food at different time points. For example, more protein before I go to bed, more protein straight after I wake up. At the moment, I actually do intermittent fasting. I've made a video on this topic and I can make a video on it again to explain why exactly I do it. My plan is to decrease my fasting time after I will lose a significant amount of fat so that I'm in a more positive protein balance over time and the chances to lose muscle are lower. So if you want to know my precise macros at the moment, I set my calories at 1650 calories on my MyFitnessPal just because in my experience this is a number that was actually pretty good for me in the past when I wanted to cut weight. However, as I want to make my cut more drastic in the beginning, I decided to stay as low below this number as possible. Last week, my energy intake was on training days between 1350 and 1450 calories. This is the amount of calories I need to be super satisfied, not to be hungry, and to perform well in the gym. Because one important point is that all my food options are actually optimized for cutting. There's actually research on the satiating effect of food, and I used it to design my diet. I ran also some experiments on myself. So I've chosen the food for my meal plan that is the most satiating for me. And then if I have even a small meal, I'm not hungry for another 4 hours. I will do another video on this topic and on all the food choices that are really good for cutting, that keep you full and satiated and satisfied, and what recipes I've developed using these food choices. In terms of carbohydrate, protein, and fat intake, my carbohydrate intake was mostly between 130 and 150 grams per day. I do really well on lower carbohydrate diets at around this range, below 150 calories, so I'm like super happy with it and I don't miss anything. Then my protein intake was at about 120 to 130 grams per day. However, as I mentioned, when I start dropping weight and I will start adding more meals in just to reduce my fasting times, my protein intake will most likely go up. Because high protein meals before going to bed have been shown in research to increase the protein balance, to make it more positive. And that's what I want, especially later when I will progress with my cut. Actually, the best thing would be waking up during the night and having some protein shakes at night just to bring myself in a more positive energy balance, or in this case also protein balance. But I'm not quite sure if I'm going to do it. There was a research study where people got gastric tubes and got protein ingested at night, and then their muscle protein synthesis increased. I'm not sure if I want to go that far, to be honest. Back to my macros. Then my fat intake is actually pretty low at the moment, and that's the only thing I don't really like. It is about 35 grams. It is important to know that I take DHA EPA, so I get sure that I get omega-3 fatty acids in, and especially in form of algae-derived DHA EPA. And as I'm going to increase my energy intake, what I plan to do later, I'm definitely going to increase my fat intake, because fat is so much more important than carbohydrates. Another reason why I'm saying that more severe cutting or high calorie deficit at the beginning of a cut is more useful is because at the beginning everyone is more motivated. Also now I'm more motivated to diet than I will be probably in 3 months. And then after 3 months of dieting, it is really painful to decrease the calories even further. And my plan is just not to do it. If I progress as I want, then I can actually increase them. And then it will make my dieting and staying on track much easier. Another reason why I preferred having a drastic calorie deficit at the beginning is that I hope to be ready for the show maybe 1 or 2 weeks before. And then I have actually the chance to try different carbohydrate loading strategies and see what works for me the best and how can I get into the best shape possible before going on stage. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any more questions, please comment below. I'm happy to answer them, and see you soon.